We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'll do a little invitation to get started.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Bow, if you please. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time as we gather to work together to further the benefit of the city of Goddard and also the greater Goddard community, which includes our school district. Help us to have ears to hear and listen and to learn this evening. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Honorable Mayor and City Council, and sorry. Welcome. Introductions.
Yeah, I was going to do a quickie here.
Yes, sir. Okay.
So, not that I have prepared remarks, but
You want to?
no, I don't need that. I'll use my big boy voice. Just want to welcome everyone here. I've lived in this community since 1997. Over the 27 years, I've watched the school district and the city grow, and we have a lot of shared mutual interests. We share a library, a swimming pool, facilities, roads, sidewalks, and a lot of different things, not only in the city of Goddard, but in the greater Goddard community. And I think it's important that we, as we're going forward and entering another probably fairly extensive time of growth, that we be able to work together and communicate and understand all the challenges that we all face. And I appreciate you taking the time. We're going to try to keep this to an hour, and I've got grandkids at home, so I'm probably pretty firm on that. So anyway, I'd like to ask our city administrator to say a few words as well, and then we'll get the rolling here.
So Dr. Henry and I, we meet about monthly one-on-one and have conversations about the different things going on in the community, and of course the greater Goddard area, the district boundary outside of Goddard, of course, and we kind of put together this idea that it might be a good opportunity for us to get together. I would like to do it once a year, but at least right now seems an appropriate time because there's lots of significant opportunity occurring in our community in the region. So gathered with us here today is the City Council, board officers with the Goddard School Board, and a couple of the executives with the school district. You have some city staff here, but before we start with our presentations, just wanted to do quick introductions just with the folks at the tables here, and then we'll go ahead and get started, okay?
You want to start us off? Chris Williams on the Planning Commission.
Jim Milligan on the Planning Commission.
Darren Klein on the Planning Commission.
Justin Parks, Planning Commission.
George Lee, Mayor Goddard.
Jenny Simmons, Goddard School Board.
Amanda Gish, School Board. Krista Hall, Council.
Audrey Collins, Council.
With that, I'll welcome our esteemed Community Development Director, Micah Scoggin.
No round of applause necessary. Well, Honorable Mayor, City Council, Planning Commission, and School Board, we welcome you to Goddard, obviously, and the City Hall. Feel free to ask us questions if you guys have comments about anything. It's supposed to be more of an open dialogue, but I'm going to run through a couple slides about Goddard's growth and development, then we'll hand it off to the school district so they can give a presentation as well, and then hopefully we can engage in some meaningful dialogue. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask during that time. So, this is an update for Goddard when it comes to housing. We hired Jerry Hoffman of Hoffman Strategies Group to do a housing study for us, and we refined it a little bit. We asked him to just kind of bring in some additional numbers to try to refine it into specifically the Goddard area. So we looked at the greater metro area for Wichita. It has Goddard related to it, and we looked at Goddard specifically. But some of these numbers and facts and figures, I didn't put these together, so if you're like, well, that seems questionable, or if you have questions about how they got compiled, I can give you all the answers, but some of it's just standard practice. But one thing which stands out right away is basically they have on this first slide these are broken into what they call social demographic cohorts. And so basically they're just saying, they put a title. So they say, like, if you're between this age and you both work, or one of you stays at home and another one works, then they put you in these sort of social demographic cohorts and they give you a title for it. And so township travelers, or white picket fences, tool belt traditionalists, those are all sort of general names for different types of cohorts and groups. And they pertain not only to Goddard, but this demographic cohort pertains to like the nation as well. So they'll summarize people to these groups and then they'll apply to a specific geography, in this case Goddard. And so what you're seeing here is that they have an average income. So these groups have an average income. And so when you take that average income, this is probably gross income, and you look at what kind of housing they'd be able to afford given the current rate of interest at that time, this is their housing affordability. And that kind of has a general size, and the MLS stands for multiple listing service, and so they look at that in comparison to the general size of the house. So a house between, somewhere around 375 to 490 is a 3-bedroom or 4-bedroom, and it's around 1550 square feet to 2700, and so on and so forth. And so you're seeing that the size gets a little bit smaller as the house price decreases, and that's in relation to what they can actually afford. So I can read these key points if you want, or you can read them off of your slides. Their big key takeaways would be that Goddard's housing market tips heavily towards homeownership, which is not surprising. It's a suburb, right? Goddard is in the Goddard School District, which means that you're going to have a lot of families with kids that want to have a house in Goddard, in the school district, but maybe work in Wichita. So they'll work in Wichita, but they'll live in Goddard, so they can take advantage of the Goddard School District. This comes from Redfin, which says right over here, and this is kind of interesting because they're trying to look at housing in terms of how fast it sells, how quickly it stays on the market, what does that mean for inventory, what does that mean for Goddard as it pertains to the greater markets. And so we asked him, Jerry Hoffman, the refiner, to just look at Goddard. And so what you're seeing here, and these are the key takeaways, so there's some kind of takeaways down here as well, I should say, but these are the big points. So median sales prices for June in 2024 compared to year over year from last year actually went up about 13%. Number of homes sold in June between 2020 and 2024 actually went down. So the price listing went up for the homes in Goddard, but the number of homes that sold went down. Now that's not exactly astounding, right? If your house is $1 million, it's going to sit on the market a lot longer, right? If it's $100,000, it's going to sell a lot faster because you have more people in that income bracket that can afford that house. If it's $1 million house, you have less people in that income bracket that can afford that house. So if home prices go up, the number of homes that sell are going to go down, generally speaking, because you're going to see a proportionality there. Median days on the market in June 2024, so 13. That means it's gone up 4 days year over year. That means it actually sits longer on the market, which once again is not surprising. If home values continue to go up, less people are going to be able to afford them, and considering that homes are going to have to be taken into account with the federal fund rate at the same time, so your ability to afford that mortgage, maybe in 2020 when it was less than 3% versus now when it's actually starting to drop now, though let's say if it was 7%, they're going to sit longer because you're not going to be able to afford as much home. Homes sold above listing price in June of 2024 was 10%, so which was actually a drop of 28.9%. And I think that just generally is going to follow the federal fund rate. So as the federal fund rate increases to stave off inflation, you're going to see a relationship there between mortgages, and then you're going to see that drop as well. So this is actually a drop in terms of what people are willing to pay over the market price. And so last year they were willing to pay more over the market price, now they're willing to pay less over the market price. And obviously you have to consider the market price every year is going up. So 10% over the market price for this year versus 10% over the market price last year, considering that the market price went up, is something for consideration. Months of supply in June 2024 was 7.9, or plus 3.9 months year over year. So that means the same month last year you had 4 months of supply. Now you have 7.9. Now, months of supply, that's interesting calculation, because what they're saying is that how many homes sold on average in that year per month. So let's say you sold 10 homes per month on average. Let's say, for that monthly average. Obviously in spring, this is probably not seasonally adjusted, but let's say that in spring homes are selling a lot more and in fall they're selling a lot less. But over that year you sell 10 homes per month. So that means if you had 50 homes on the market available to be bought, then that means you have 5 months of supply. 10 units, or 10 homes I should say, per month, and if you have 50 available to be bought, then you have 5 months of supply. So that's how they came up with that calculation, which is interesting. For sale housing market, so this just ties back into what we just looked at. You're seeing that homes between $150,000 and $250,000 sold a lot more. There was about 18 versus Wichita, there was 87. So obviously our comparison to Wichita. And then our supply of homes that sold drop and drop and drop and continue to drop the more expensive they get. So the fact that we actually had 6 homes that sold at $650,000, $750,000, I don't know where those homes were at, but they apparently got it somewhere and they sold. We had one house apparently that was $750,000 to $850,000 compared to Wichita that had 9, and then we had 0 that were $850,000 or more that sold, 20 in Wichita. So that's just kind of interesting, but that's not abnormal. But what's this kind of heavy spike is more what you see in Wichita, because the orange, remember, symbolizes Wichita, blue is Goddard. But basically that just goes back to the previous slide. If you had homes that were less expensive, they're going to sell faster than homes that are more expensive, given the number of people that are able to afford that home. It's just relative to the amount of median household incomes. Key points are here. Once again, MLS just means multiple listing service. There are no townhomes or condos for sale in Goddard, which that's not that surprising. We don't actually have any condos, so that doesn't surprise anybody. There's none for sale. We don't have it. So. And nearly 50% of that, and then the key point in addition to growing, this is kind of one of the key points that the Hoffman strategy group was trying to make. In addition to growing the single family detached home inventory, the opportunity exists for the introduction, I think they should say, inventory for missing middle for Goddard. That means townhomes, duplexes, fourplexes, etc. Missing middle is a term you'll probably hear a lot. Basically means anything between a single family and a medium rise or medium high rise. You know, high rise is going to be like 10 stories above, and a medium rise is going to be like garden apartments, which are like 3 to 4 stories. So anything between single family and a medium rise, that's missing middle. That's what they call missing middle, which is duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, and things of that nature. So there's a housing market opportunity here. I won't get into all the details here. There's going to be a lot. Basically, they're saying that there's renter-occupied is largely predominant in Goddard. Owner-occupied is largely predominant in Goddard. Renter-occupied, there's an opportunity there. Of the 1,509 owner-occupied housing units, 71 units are actively listed on MLS to keep up with growth forecasts in owner-occupied households. 490 new housing units are needed in the city of Goddard through 2033. This is a forecast, they said, for up to 2033. The level of absorption achieved primarily through net in-migration of singles, couples, families, empty nesters, and home prices pushing would-be first-time owners to market rate rentals. So that's not abnormal, and we've talked about that before. So if the market is just too cumbersome for people who are trying to buy the first house, they're going to rent for a while until it cools down. That is it for my presentation. I want to give more time to our guests at the school district, but if you guys have any questions at this point, or do you guys want to have any questions for Craig Crossing, City Administrator, or anybody else at this point?
Pretty quiet group. Yeah. Like our last meeting, everybody was really quiet. Chiefs were playing around going.
Mayor and Mike, I would just say we're going to keep like a half hour of this available for open discussion. So if you start feeling a little less shy here later, you can, of course, we'll pull these back up, these slides back up, and you can ask additional questions. Time.
Just call George shy.
Yes.
Well, I think at this point we would like to invite the school district up to give their presentation.
Well, hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Doug Maxwell. I'm the CFO of the school district. So happy to be here. Thank you again for inviting us to give us a chance to kind of talk through all this and collaborate. What I'm going to talk about, I think, can kind of divide into 3 pieces. We're going to go through a little history, more recent history with the school and bond issues that we've passed recently, and some of the things that were built there and some of the dollar amounts. Then we're going to kind of get into the middle part where we've been struggling with trying to outguess where our enrollment was headed. And so we used a demographic company, Davis Demographics out of Dallas, Texas, to help us with some of that. So we'll spend some time in the middle on that. But based on their most recent report, and you guys are seeing the home builds as well, it looks like pretty significant enrollment growth is coming for us. So we're talking about next steps and what the next probably bond issue timeline might be. So with that, we'll get into this. I went back to 98. That seemed kind of the most relevant to go back to, so a little over 25 years. The bond issue that passed that year was $3.4 million for Clark Davidson. That's probably the first of kind of our modern, I guess, elementaries you'd call them, kind of built to a certain spec, certain size, and all that. It's been added on to a couple times since then, but $3.4 million in 98. This then started our entry into kind of a time of really rapid growth for us. So these started happening fairly in rapid order. In 94, a much bigger bond issue, 19.4 million. That was the new Goddard High School. I always think it's interesting because I'm not from here originally. When someone talks about what they think of as Goddard High School, it kind of tells me, okay, that's how long you've been here. Because there's about 4 of those, I think, but depending on which building you're talking about. But this built the Goddard High School out there on Pawnee, so in part of that campus. That was May of 94, 19.4 million. I'm sorry, there's a typo on that first. That should be November of 88, the very first one listed. So now we're in November of 98. 25.9 million. That built Earhart Elementary, which was our first facility north of Kellogg, out there on that campus. And then this is going to get confusing because the names start changing on some of these buildings, but it was Eisenhower Middle on the Goddard High School campus. So that was our second middle school as a district. So at that point, Goddard Middle School was the old high school that's the roundhouse down here on farther south on Main Street that was built in the 70s. That was a middle school at the time, and that was Goddard Middle. June of 04, another roughly the same bond issue, 23.9 million. I'm jumping around here. So that was the Explorer Elementary building north of Kellogg. That also bought the rest of the ground that was part of that Eisenhower campus. November of 07 then was really the big one. And so in that period of time, there's about a 5-year stretch there where the district grew by 1,000 kids. And that took it up from 3,500 to about 4,500. So that was really happening in rapid succession. And really that 07 bond kind of made the district what it is today. Built the second high school. So that was Eisenhower High School out on that campus. Built a new middle school out there that became Eisenhower Middle. So the middle school out here on the Pawnee campus then was renamed Goddard Middle. Also built the second elementary out there, Apollo. And really kind of set us up for where we are now. So you see those, again, all happen in fairly rapid succession every 3 or 4 or 5 years. Now that starts to spread out quite a bit because, again, the second high school really set us up. We really have to kind of thank, the superintendents at the time, the board at the time, that they were really forward-thinking, and that was a big decision going for a second high school. There's just more expense when you have a second high school. You're doing 2 football teams, you're doing 2 marching bands, you're doing 2 of everything. It's just going to cost a little more. But it's also doubling the opportunities for kids. And that was really why that decision was made. Within a few years of it opening, we had 2 football teams, I think, make the semifinal round in state. But it wasn't just 2 football teams that got to participate. It was 2 marching bands and 2 sets of cheerleaders, and all that went into that. So it was really, and again, it couldn't have been an easy decision, but I think it was the decision that we thought was right for kids and has paid off for us ever since. So I guess I like that bond issue so much I listed it twice. Again, I'm not quite clear why I did that, but we'll pretend I did that intentionally. So to kind of remind you, then look at that gap. We went from elections every 3 or 4 or 5 years. It was another 10 years before we had a bond election. But again, that really kind of set us up. That one gave us the 2 similar middle schools, the 2 high schools, the extra elementary, and so really set us up for success for a decade. April 17 was probably a different kind of bond issue than for us. It was really more about reinvesting in facilities that already existed. We weren't really building a new school, but it was a lot of additions, and really safety and security was the focus of that one. One of the big things that had happened in the interim was Memorial, Oklahoma tornado. And that one was different. You know, we all remember Greensburg, but I think school districts generally thought, as bad as tornadoes can be, they're usually an evening, nighttime event. You know, thunderstorms usually happen at night. Memorial, Oklahoma happened in the middle of the afternoon and school was in session. And so that really woke a lot of districts up to thinking, where are we at in terms of storm shelters in all our buildings just in case? So that was a big part of it. We had additions to all of those buildings. It's usable space. There are classrooms in some, there are meeting spaces in others. In Clark Davison, it's a cafeteria. So it's all being used, but primarily for storm shelters, also door locks for, you know, in case of an active shooter situation. So just again, a big safety and security focus. And that's our most recent bond issue. So again, 10 years passed there in the interim, and we're already 7, almost 8 years down the road from that bond. So that kind of wraps up the history part of this. Now kind of where we are today. You know, as a district, we had 35, 36, something like that years of enrollment growth, just unbroken enrollment growth. But then that started to really slow down for us. Yet we were seeing all the construction going on. So how do you figure all that out? So kind of like you guys had used kind of consultant or there's someone there to work with to kind of look at your housing. We partnered with Davis Demographics to help us on the enrollment growth and forecast. We won't dive too deeply into this, but this is kind of their process. And again, there's probably three keys to what they're looking at, which kind of makes sense once you think about it. But one of the tough ones for us is kindergarten. You know, once you know the size of your kindergarten, it's pretty easy to guess first grade. You know, if they all come back, you know that number. Kindergarten is just kind of a guess for us. We just don't really know. But what they do is they look at all the birth rate information. And so looking back at the history, they can say, you've had, you know, 7 years ago, you had this many births in your area. And then 5 years later, that was your kindergarten size. So maybe it's 75%, 85%, whatever that number. And they extrapolate that out. So they look at live births year to year. And then 5 years later, what was the kindergarten class year to year? And that really lets them predict pretty closely what our future kindergarten classes should be based on the live births we've seen in the last 4 or 5 years. So that's the first part. Second part is mobility. So that's separate from new homes. It's really about, does your district generally add kids as kids move through school or subtract kids? Are people moving in or moving out? And we're very fortunate as a district, we're a move-in district. So as the first grade goes to second grade, it's almost always a little bigger. Third grade goes to fourth grade, it's almost always a little bigger because we eventually have more people moving in. They maybe started somewhere else, private school or wherever they started, they eventually work their way back to us. So it's a good position to be in, but that's something they watch. And then the last side is the student yield, and that really goes to development. That's new homes, and that's what's really changed in the last study we had. I love this map, so I show it every time. Again, it's a little hard to see on the screen. I don't know if it's any easier to see as a printout. But I like pictures, I guess, in bright colors, so we show it. But it's meant to be kind of a heat map. It shows where the growth is coming from within the district. So the blue line around it that's carved up is our district boundary. So, you know, Goddard is going to be over here. Yeah. So Goddard is going to be kind of on this end. This is Kellogg. So if that gives you a sense of kind of what we're looking at. It's got some different hooks there because it's our transportation boundaries more than it is roads. But our transportation boundaries usually kind of follow a road. So Goddard's going to be towards the left, and then obviously we start picking up Wichita to the right. Our right or east border goes right up to the airport, basically. So we're just this side of that golf course. So it's the airport and the golf course are there, and then we go straight south. To the west, we go out basically to Lake Afton, and then to the north, just past Central. What this is attempting to show, though, is where most of the growth is coming from, and then it overlays on that the different developments they're tracking, so not just in City of Goddard, but across the whole district. But one of the things I also think is kind of cool about that is, you know, all the growth is really coming from about a third of the area. So there's a lot of potential still out there. Now, that's easy to say. There's a lot of farm ground down there that probably isn't for sale, or maybe there's no water or sewer to get there, so it's not all going to develop all at once. The market may not be there for it either, but there's definitely potential. Our district is 65 miles square. Mays is our friendly neighbors to the north, and we're not competitive with them at all, but
It's good for a point of reference.
and we're streaming this live, so that's all I'm going to say about that. But no, they're great. Their district though is about 38 or 39 square miles. So now they're actually a larger district than us currently. But again, the potential, depending on where things go, is pretty exciting, I think. So anyway, that's a map I like to show, and it comes right from the demographic study. So we've done this 3 times now with them. Each time it came out a little differently, but at the time it came out, it was super accurate. The first study we had was in 18 and showed just kind of slow but ongoing growth, about 1% every year. And that was accurate for the first few years, but then we had 2020 happen. So that really changed things for a lot of places. And so in 21, once things had kind of settled out, thought it was a good idea to go back and get another one. And it did change some things. Instead of steady growth going out, it really was indicating we probably have plateaued as a district and may start to lose enrollment. So some headwinds we were facing there, and it's nobody's fault. It was just what you're seeing, not just here, but regionally, statewide, nationwide. People getting married later, if at all, and having fewer kids, if any. Well, that's going to hurt a school district. I mean, you're just having less children per home, even if you're building some homes. Back in the day, when it was Charlie Edmonds here and Rod Dietz here, they would drive around and count basements and basically assign 1 student per basement. This company uses about 0.48 per new build, so less than half of the kids that are being generated by new homes or residential units. So that's one big part. The other part, though, we're seeing is the aging in place idea. So it may not be as much in the city of Goddard, but on the west side of Wichita, where a lot of our families come from, if they move out here for the school, well, they'll stay there while their kids are still in school. But then once those kids age out, they may move on. It's sell the house, go do something else, downsize, whatever they do. That was an opportunity for a new family to move in then. That didn't require a new build, but just that house turned over and a new family moved in. You're not seeing nearly as much of that right now. Part of that may be if some people are still remote working, I need that extra bedroom for an office or something. But I think the other thing is, you mentioned interest rates. The person that's there probably has a really low rate, and they just may not want to sell right now. I mean, why would I sell a house I may have almost paid off to pay more for something else that I'm going to have a 6, 7, 8% interest rate on? So, some thoughts there. The new study, though, blew all that up because, again, all the new home builds at some point that blows past any of those other headwinds, and that's what's happening. The old studies were tracking about 20 developments. This study has 53 active developments going on inside the district. Almost 6,000 new homes predicted in the next 10 years. So even at half a student a home, that's a bunch of new kids. This is FTE, not head count. Our head count's closer to 6,300, but FTE, full-time equivalent, has us gaining, from almost 6,000 kids to almost 7,500 kids in that time frame. That's to 2030. Annual growth, so year over year, shows gaining 100 kids in year 1, 150 in year 2, and then it really ramps up. We're back to the stage of 200, almost 300 kids a year. New kids growing. That's a bunch. That's a bunch. We had count day just a few weeks ago, September 20th. We gained 97 kids. So feels like they're pretty close. So what's that mean for the district? I never want to sound like I'm complaining because we'll take the growth. I mean, growth is a good thing for us, and like most, I think, cities, businesses, whatever, it's better than the alternative. And we have neighboring districts that are dealing with declines year after year, and that's no fun. But there are challenges. I mean, staffing, you gotta find more staff. It's still a struggle to find bus drivers, maintenance folks. We're pretty good on teachers, but even that can change. So something to stay on top of. But then you also have just our schools running out of space. Where we're really seeing the pinch right now is in our elementary schools. We have 2 that are essentially full now. So, and the study shows that's really where the challenge starts for us. So what are our next steps? We've already kind of started the process. It's super early, so I won't have much as far as details for you. But we're working with Schaefer Architecture again. That's who helped us with our $52 million bond projects. Matt Ham is kind of our lead architect. He's a Goddard graduate. Kids have gone through Goddard. Loves our district, wants to do the best for us, and does a great job. They're in the process of conducting outreach with every building. We've had staff surveys, involve as many people as we can. We've also started a steering committee. It's a little over 50 people, I think. Great group. It's a combination of parents, staff, a couple of board members. Represents every school, every age group. Next steps for that group, we probably even break it down further into subcommittees so they can really dive into the details. But ultimately, their goal is going to be to really define the projects. What will the next bond issue look like? What are the dollars associated with it? What's the tax estimates? That then gets presented and hopefully approved by our board. That would be an important next step. Then we still have a couple more steps. Our bond, we can't just have an election. We have to have it approved by the State Board of Education. So we would apply for that hopefully by their February meeting with the idea of a bond election sometime in May of 2025. So that's where we think we are. Again, not a lot of specifics yet because we just haven't gotten there, but that's our process so far. One little unique piece to this is probably school districts can't directly be involved in an election. So we can take it up to a point and have the election, but then another group is going to have to take the ball and run with it as far as passing it. So we're really involved at this point. At some point we sort of hand it off and hope for the best. But the area has been super supportive of us, and I think we're able to come up with a good group of projects that make sense. It'll go well. So that's all I have. So we can pause for questions. Dr. Henry?
Can we talk about the limitation, the state level, the potential for that?
Lawn cap.
Yeah, lawn cap, that would be something not important.
So 2016, the legislature helped, and their help was, we need to do something to get control, quote unquote, of bond issues. And their view was local communities vote, and then part of the bond is paid for by state aid. So everything in our budget is determined by assessed evaluation per pupil. So if you are a suburban district by nature, you're going to have a higher number of kids, but lower property values because you don't have industry. So when people think about poor or wealthy districts, a lot of times they confuse it with what's your average house price, which we're in the top 20 out of 286 states. But from a budgeting standpoint, we're very poor because our assessed evaluation per pupil is low. We don't have Wolf Creek. We don't have some major development of industry that's bringing in a large amount of taxes. Ours are primarily rooftops. That's starting to change, but it's still primarily rooftops. So previously, 60% of our bonds were paid with state aid. Equalizes the tax burden across the state. Most would argue if the state constitution talks about education, the burden you pay in taxes should be similar to what somebody in Burlington pays. Just because they have Wolf Creek should their taxes be considerably less to have access to the same public education that your kids do. So the state decided, well, since we're paying equalization aid on bonds, we have to get a handle on this. So they passed a bond cap, which basically is the previous year's general obligation bonds are retired, plus a inflationary multiplier. So for current year, the bond cap is $590 million. It's never been hit, but if there's enough bonds passed before a week ago in May, if the state doesn't have equalization aid, they would tell us when we apply to the state board, you don't get to run your bond. We think there's going to be room. That definitely could change if others have elections before we do. So as Doug talked about, local board decides, state board has to approve, but now there's an additional hoop. If there's not bond cap, you don't get to run your bond. We can show all of these reasons we need to have a bond, but if they're at, pick your number, 500 million, and we need $150 million of bond space, we don't run. It's probably slightly even more discriminating, because if you don't qualify for state aid, you don't have to worry about the bond cap. So if you're in a community or a school district that has a higher assessed evaluation per pupil and you're paying less taxes, you can do whatever you want. You don't have to worry about the bond cap. But in our specific instance, we've had to keep an eye on it because KCK is running a $180 million bond in November. The most one district can count is $174 million. So if theirs was to pass, there's $174 million. If there's 3 or 4 other districts out there that run 50 to 100 million, that becomes an issue and in a lot of ways takes our voice away. So that's kind of the bond cap that has never been an issue before. When we ran in 17 it wasn't. But definitely something we're looking at right now.
But how much we don't get that much from them anymore, the state.
We get 6%.
Yeah, not.
So besides capping, they dramatically reduced, they dramatically reduced the amount of state aid on bonds. So just use 100 million. If we would have ran a $100 million bond in X year, 40 million of that would have been local taxes. Now theoretically, out of 90 plus million, for the same 100 million would be local taxes. So there's some great opportunities there. Anything else?
So does that cap roll over year to year?
It does. So what would happen is, if we went to the state board in February and they said, great project, but we can't approve it to run this year, what we think they would do is they would give you a tentative improvement. Then after July 1, you would be higher in the queue for the next year. So that's our plan. If for some reason the bond cap didn't allow it, then we would probably look at the end of August. So not a long time after, but it gets you to July 1 reset. State board, our understanding currently, and this is new because they've never had the bond cap get hit before, they would not necessarily have to go back through the entire approval process. Our board would then have to adopt a new resolution for the election date, but as long as the scope of the bond didn't change, current understanding is it would just be a local action to change the election date. And we've talked to the county. They've never had to deal with the bond cap previously and walked them through it. So what they've told us is they really need 60 days notice from when do you want to have an election and when they have to hit go. So that's why it's important we get it to the state board in February. If they give us the yes, there's bond cap, then we can get with Sedgwick County and they can get the election organized. So we were looking for hoops, so we found some.
They're out there everywhere. Other questions and comments? We've got 19 minutes and 52 seconds. We'll try to wrap this up. I'll bring something up. Oh, Sean, one of the things as a city we try to become more engaged in some of the area groups that meet. One of them is the Wichita Area Metropolitan Planning Organization. Probably the last 10 years we haven't had very good representation there. Our city administrator is known what they call the TAC board. By being the mayor and being present, I'm on the board for that organization. One of the things they do on a 2-year basis is they receive somewhere on average for a 2-year period of time, somewhere between $24 and $30 million to be used for streets and different programs. One of the programs that they have is sidewalks for schools. But you have to get in the queue, and right now, the next time that things queue up for us will be 2026. There's some possibility that there might be some funds available for us next year, excess funds late in the year, that maybe we would be able to work on some sidewalks for school project. I know just within our city limits, we've got some areas, specifically, I think 2nd Street has a sidewalk that runs from Main to Walnut. There's about a block with a sidewalk on 1st Street. 3rd Street, I've seen some people talking about people and kids walking on the street, and some people walking in the yards, and that sometimes upsetting to folks. But the point being, I think there, at least in that neighborhood of Old Goddard, it looks like that neighborhood has turned over some. There are more kids, I think, walking right now, and so there might be some opportunity. I think we do the heavy lifting on most of the applications and things, and I'm not exactly sure how that'll actually fold out, but that might be a way that we could participate, and maybe there's some funding there to do some of these things. And I know going forward, the big gorilla in that room is the city of Wichita, but this 2-year period of time, there's 120 projects that have been approved. I think 100 of them have been approved that go to the city of Wichita. But you know, if you don't get your name in and present any projects, you're not going to receive any help. And I just envision a day where maybe we get turned at the till, and maybe we could pay for the expansion of 183rd Street from Kellogg to Maple. Maybe do something at 167th Street in conjunction with the city of Wichita. I know, Dr. Henry, it only took you, 15 years to get a stoplight and slow the traffic down on 23rd Street. Things that people have worked on a long time. But I think where we can communicate those things and work together, I think just learning the extra hoops you're having to jump through is important, because our citizens are part of the district, and I think we share a lot of streets and sidewalks and roads, and as we're going forward with all this new construction and adding of people, and we want to be sure that we can support each other in a mutual interest. So that was just one thing that the schools for sidewalks for schools things pretty specific that I think they want both of us on the dotted line for a request. But I'm gonna give Dr. Henry an extra pen and give his name on the thing.
You had us where you said, well, the city does all the heavy lifting.
Well, that's good, because I've heard somebody that I work with there in the city, or city administrator, said that he's good at doing that heavy lifting stuff. So.
One of the comments I wanted to make is, I think we ought to amplify the accuracy of that Davis demographic study. I think it's really profound that the trends have so closely followed it. Each year you guys updated it, and then again, just the most recent head count was only off by 3 students for the 2024-2025 school year. So as we're having these conversations with the broader community, really pointing back to that. Hey, there's a pretty good level of accuracy here, and that this may actually come to fruition, so it's something that we really need to be thinking about, and use that as best as we can as we plan a way forward.
Yeah, I think initially when that study came out a couple of years ago, we were all shocked with the results, because we all saw all the developments around us, and we were a little shocked that it was so offset by the decline in birth rates, etc. So I think this one makes a little more sense to us, but they've got the added developments in there.
You were to rewind 1 year, we couldn't be having this conversation, because last year we dropped 35 students for the first time ever. So the accuracy, and you guys are heavily involved, whether you know them or not, in these demographic studies. They come on site, work with your staff, work with the county, and work with the city of Wichita. So their numbers are only as good as what they're really getting. But we couldn't have been having this conversation last year, because the question people really should have asked is, how can you ask to build new schools when you just dropped in enrollment? So now to be back up 97, and you see the trend data, and to be able to note you went from 20 active developments to 53 or 54, I think that's good information for everyone.
It's great information, Dr. Harry. One of the things that I really appreciate about this opportunity to come together is being able to highlight a couple of the other things that more directly relate to our planning, our city planning. Out of those 53 developments, only 10 of them are in the city of Goddard, and I think it's 70% of the school district is actually Wichita, and only 30 is in Goddard. And so while we have the council and the planning commission in the same room, I think that bit of information points us back to, if we're not allowing the development to happen in our community, it's going to happen right next door and within the school district. So we're still going to benefit from it, but we're not going to get the greatest amount of value we can out of those rooftops if we're not allowing those developments to occur on our own side of the line, so to speak. So I didn't realize that those were the ratios until I got back here for my second stint serving our community, but I like that that's being highlighted in this, and I think it's an important factor as Planning Commission and City Council look at approving zonings and plats and different types of land use, and et cetera.
So what is your long-term vision for Goddard? Do you guys, you have 10 developments within the city limits, but what is your vision long-term? I mean, you talked about the missing middle, I think, in your presentation. Is there some expectation to fill that gap, or what are you thinking?
So much of that is market driven, and the folks who make those investments in our community, the region, they're going to build what they think is going to move and what is desirable by the market. And so a lot of it's not so much set by us, and when we try to steer that to the left or right, sometimes we can kind of step on little landmines here and there. What we do see is that a lot of the similar type of development that's occurring in Goddard is also occurring right next door, more so in West Sedgwick County. But what our main focus has really been is on refining and developing a 10-year capital improvement program to make sure that we are putting our eyes on all the things that we have underground, our public infrastructure, and make sure that we're keeping up with the growth that is occurring. That's been a focus, because the growth's going to happen organically, mostly because we have such a wonderful school district, so we want to be over here. So our vision is really more so trying to make sure that we're adequately reinvesting in our public infrastructure and also expanding it to make sure we can keep up with the growth. A lot of our pain points are actually on the periphery of the city where we share a border with the other cities, so sometimes it can be a little bit more of a challenge, because when you have multiple agencies involved, it can get a little more bureaucratic, of course. Hopefully that answered the question.
I think too, we're working on issues that relates to water. Last year we used 74% of our well capacity. Our 4 wells are off of 119th Street. We learned some new information. We may be able to more capacity there. We did sign an agreement this spring with Rural Water District number 4 for 35 million gallons of water, and you can't connect that with straws. That's going to require some investment. I think you said the number, but maybe $350,000 just to make that connection. We're probably short of storage. We had a day in August last year where we used 1.2 million gallons of water in a day. We have storage capacity in the bulb and the blue tub of 1 million. They suggest that your capacity for storage should be equal to a day. You like the blue tub thing, okay. I have a bad memory, so I just nickname things so I can keep going. And as it relates to the donut hole, it really includes the school district as well. The school district doesn't have, as we kind of looked at things, any large modern Class A apartments built in that same area. So it seems like our school district and our city has kind of been the population growth has really been driven by the school district over the years. And I did have an opportunity one time to go riding with Rod Dietz as they were counting basements. And that formula is pretty precise. It changed between like 1.3 and 1.2 from year to year, but they were very accurate in that calculation. I think we're fortunate that, that they were able to do that. The other thing, I think, when the schools were built in 2007, then we had the recession of 2008. The projected growth was kind of slowed, and it's really allowed this time as the area, gradually kind of slowed down. The growth is maintained, but now I think, depending on what happens at this next election, that pace could continue to pick up. That's the thing. These things, elections take place, public policy changes, and then the economy and things either ebb and flow or pick up. So what that looks like, in another 12 to 18 months, these numbers might be low. And so it does provide an awful lot of challenges for us for our infrastructure. But my guess is that in the next 5 years we'll see probably Class A apartments built, not only in our community but also in the greater school district area. The population density also drives the retail, and it's just interesting the similarities in terms of the tax base as it relates to industry and business. We have the same limitations. The Star Bond District is a tremendous asset to our community, but right now all those funds within that district are going to pay for the infrastructure of that. One of these days, that'll be a benefit to us financially as well. So, I think we share a lot of similarities in terms of
I have a question. When you look at your demographics and you say that enrollment is slow recently, when y'all do your calculations, do you predict the amount of students who are using alternative methods like homeschooling or?
Yeah, they have a capture rate in the study, so market share. So they show you what your market share is of school age kids.
There's also 3 private schools inside the district, Oyster, St. Peter.
And that was all divided up on those.
So that's part of it too.
Planning Commission questions. You guys are pretty quiet over here. Yeah, you guys.
I got a question. What percentage of the classrooms are full? I mean, as in kid-wise, is each room like 50%, 60%, 70%?
Doesn't it depend on
Or is there a number for it?
There's a number of how many bodies you might want to put in a classroom. And obviously the classrooms at Oak Street, what the fire marshal is going to say per classroom versus at Explorer, just because of the build is going to be different. But then you also have, besides just the limitation on space, you may have a classroom that when Oak Street was originally built, it was a 3rd grade classroom. But now it serves maybe 3 students that have challenges and need more space. So you may have 3 special education students in a classroom and a couple special ed teachers and a para. So physically that classroom is out of space. Maybe it only has 9 people, and at one point they had 25, so it gets more difficult. Some of your career tech ed classes that didn't exist 10 years ago, being more specialized, you probably have some equipment. We think technology shrinks things, but in some classroom spaces it just reutilizes it differently. Then you have, and what's a driver right now, so for our elementary schools, the best model is 4 sections per grade level. So 4 at kindergarten, 4 at first, all the way up to 4th. If I'm an elementary teacher, the only time I'm going to have planning time or go to the bathroom or eat lunch is when my kids aren't in the classroom. Whereas the high school and middle school schedules, those are easier to get there. If I'm teaching English, you have 1 block at your planning period, and you teach the other 6. So at the elementary level, for that schedule to work, your homeroom students have to be able to rotate to the specials, whether it's art, music, PE, etc. So at times, it was at Explorer, now it's at Apollo and Earhart, the principal will come to you and say, can I have 5 sections of 3rd grade? Well, can we find the space? Maybe. Can we find the teacher? And we're one of few districts in Kansas that the answer of can you find the teacher and can you find a good teacher is yes. And we're very aggressive. We just signed had a signing party for our first teacher for next year. It's actually a Goddard High grad from 3 years ago. But when you add the 5th section, maybe before I had science or music for 40 minutes, but as you continue to add 5 sections at multiple grade levels, now all of a sudden I'm just going to science for 24 minutes. So then you have to have the discussion of if kindergartners are going to PE or science for 24 minutes and it takes 10 minutes to line up, and you're really only in there for 15 minutes, and then 10 more minutes to line up to leave, has your system really produced the results that it's designed to do? And I don't think our system is designed to just be able to supplement our core curriculum for 15 minutes. So we really need 4 sections. When it's 4 sections per grade level, that works. But you also can't have classes of 35 students. So then the temptation to add the 5th section. So when we think about specifically right now Apollo and Earhart, they could have 5 sections. Primarily they're still at 4. So if you add additional elementaries, it lets you reset and get back to 3 or 4 sections per grade level. So it's a real long question to what should be a very simple answer, and I apologize. So they're kind of full.
Yeah, okay.
And that would be our greatest need that we foresee right now would be the elementary school would be the priority.
Well, that's what's driving me to middle school, intermediate middle school, and high school too.
Right.
So then for your grade schools are packed. What your high school, everything else can do to make it there.
Right.
And that's where you probably do it in a couple of bites. You know, kind of like the history we showed, you know, you probably don't try to outguess it all in the first round election, but you address the primary needs and some maybe medium needs, and then let's see that the growth actually gets here. You know, again, recession, something could happen, something has happened the last couple times we've done this to slow it down. But you know, in 4 or 5 years, we're going to know, yeah, it's coming and it's still coming. And at that point, yeah, you address the other grade levels at the same time.
What's the timeline to build a grade school?
Right here, we're at 2 minutes.
Yeah.
What was that?
Probably a couple of years.
Okay.
Before I get the hook, I just want to thank you guys for allowing us to come out. Meeting yesterday with 30 school districts represented across the state. Probably in that room, 28 of them are declining enrollment, including some areas of the state you don't think about. And while these challenges are the things you struggle with and dedicate your time to serve on are challenges, we will take this. Yes, it's hard and there's a lot of hoops. But if you're declining in enrollment or population, that's when we start cutting people, and that starts to hurt students. So we're thankful for the opportunity to collaborate and be here tonight.
Maybe Dr. Henry?
Yeah.
Greg, do you want to say a closing word? Knowing that you got.
I couldn't have said it better myself, so with my 30 seconds, I will just echo Dr. Henry's comments. I'm going to see if I can twist his arm into doing this again next year, and maybe we'll have a bond pass, and we'll have a 10-year capital improvement program, and we'll have an even better insight of what the near future holds. So I'm really excited that we're able to do this, and appreciate the staff time of Mr. Maxwell and Mr. Scoggin here to put together some materials that we could receive presentation on. So with that, Mayor, you want to move to adjourn?
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion.
Motion second, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Let's go home. Thank you all very much. Appreciate your time. Very good. Very informative.